Hi everyone. So I'd just like to kick things off by welcoming you all to the WayWORD Festival and welcome virtually to Aberdeen. So the festival is brought to you today by the Word Centre for Creative Writing, along with the generous support of Creative Scotland and the University of Aberdeen. So I'm very happy to be able to say that we've got Graeme Armstrong and Eli Percy here, and we're all going to have a little chat about writing in class. My name's Sarah and I'm a student at the University of Aberdeen, and I'm going to be co-chairing this event along with Sarah Sharp. Sarah's going to talk us through the housekeeping for this event quickly, and then we'll hear readings from our two authors. So I'll just pass you on to Sarah.
Hello. So this event today, our format is going to be that we are going to begin by hearing readings from our two authors, first Graeme, then Eli, and we're going to ask a few specific questions about those readings, and then we'll be having more of a discussion amongst ourselves. After that, we'll be taking questions from the audience. So if you think of a question or you have a burning question already that you'd like to ask, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see a Q&A button. And if you could put your questions there, I will call upon you in the last kind of 10, 15 minutes of this session. For those of you who are looking at the screen from home, we have the marvelous Leslie Crerar with us, and she is going to be our BSL interpreter today, and she should be on screen during the entire session. The other thing that you can do for accessibility is that we have live transcript, live captioning going on, and in order to use that, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see two C's. Don't say that's difficult to say. You'll see two C's, and if you just click that, you'll be able to see the live captions. So I think that is everything you need to know at this stage, and welcome to the session.
Perfect. So we're going to kick things off with a reading from Graeme. Graham Armstrong is a Times best-selling author from Airdrie. His teenage years were spent within Scotland's young teen gang culture. He defied expectation to read English as an undergraduate at the University of Stirling, where he then undertook a master's in creative writing. His debut novel, The Young Team, was published by Picador in 2020, and it's based upon his experiences. And it's also being adapted for TV, which is massively exciting. So I'll just pass over to you, Graeme.
Hi guys, thank you very much for having me. Class doesn't really raise its head until the end of the novel, in a lived experience kind of way. So I've got two short readings that I think best sum that up. First one's Different Paths. Addison heard I was back and texts while I'm sitting in my Mosbit. He tells me he's going to come round and say alright, and I bounce out and light a fag and wait for the cunt. He flies round the corner and pulls up my new Edge silver BMW 320i coupe, a fucking beaut. I'm driving a black Mark IV Golf GT TDI, but I know free plate with 90,000 in the clock. He's his usual trendy self in a knitted black jumper with styled hair and designer stubble. There's a tall blonde sitting next to him with her chin up, smoking a Marlboro Gold out the window. Paul gives me a look, up and down, to check what I'm wearing, in case I embarrass him in front of his new bird. Guilt by association, warrant it for the fucking fashion police. Nice to see you, Alan. How's tricks? Not bad. You working? Just arrived back up the road, mate. Was with Patricia in Newcastle, thinking about uni next year. Oh yeah? Doing what? Thick, with implication. Uni's pretty tough, has he? Maybe you'd be a better out digging the roads or something. Maybe get a trade, bro. Not sure, mate. English or something? Ah, nice, man. What about yourself? Ah, just about to do my final honours year, man. Finish next year and hopefully get a job with my dad's company. Ah, you're sorted, bro. Who's your friend? That's Felicity. She nods in my direction and obliges me a smile while she flicks her smoke. Hiya, I say, but she doesn't reply. What he's up to? Just heading into the town for dinner. Ah, cool, mate. Nice one. Well, I'll let you go. Nice to see you anyway. Same, mate. Take it easy. I watched the BMW fly out the street. and disappeared in the corner. Paul's obviously grown up, cleaned his cell up, and got himself a nice bird. There was no need for him to stay associated with us now. It was all half-tone pleasantries and awkward silences. I doubted somehow he'd be running about the dancings in our wee town, or hanging about the old gaffs full of troops. Being a Ned for him was a fashion statement, nothing more. For the rest of us, it was a lifestyle and a culture and who we all were. Paul never aligned himself with cunts that were going to fuck our lives up. There's no betrayal to his success. Maybe him Felicity of a nice flat in the West End, handy for Ashton Lane and Byers Road. In a way, I'm happy for him. He's got his bee on, and he's gone. I think at that point in life, you know, they're starting to see friends go to their succinct fates, you know. Loads of the boys are now working, and obviously this young man's doing well because he comes from a more middle class background, so the split was obvious. But when it really rears its head is when Monica, as his love interest, goes to university and she invites him out on a night out with her pals. And Friday night, you know, as a flashpoint, the fundamental difference between us. Fridays, like some other days, have become lonely for the Aussie boy. I've come to loathe the sacred Friday night. Aye, I might be treading the right path, and everybody can see how well you're doing off drugs and barely drinking. But there's something missing. Some kind of cavity that a past spent like ours has left. There's no new pals to go and do other stuff with. I dream about doing stuff we missed out on when we were younger, camping and shit like that. But you're too ill to do that kind of stuff, or at least to do it in the same way. You heard cunts talking about birds and mad adventure holidays, travelling, going indoor snowboarding at Braehead and shit like that. Different shit. We never done nothing like that. And if you'd asked any cunt, they would have just laughed. There's nothing to talk about with a decent bird. No prospects, no adventures. The mad scheme birds are still attracted to cunts who think they're mental. We're past all that now. So what's left? There's no mass exodus of cunts changing their lives. The road to redemption is always going to be a lonely one. I'm going to miss out the romantic bit in the middle. It's a bit early for that. So she asks him out, they have a wee chat, and then she asks him out with her pals, right, for a uni night out. She says, okay, I'm heading out tonight with a few friends. Do you want to come? What friends? Oh, a couple of mates from uni. Aye, but what ones? Not Dominic, just a couple of girls and guys. They're all cool. Deep down, I'm inclined to avoid these kind of situations. But to say no makes you look para and antisocial. But I've got this wee feeling that the types she hangs about with aren't our people, and we aren't theirs. Sitting among these types and putting on my more proper English register isn't so appealing, because I'm knee deep in with the boys again, and all the shite about here's buzzing about my nut, while Monica's crew are talking about studying, their gap years, which post-grad they're going to do, or how many lanes in Africa they're going to build huts for. I'm thinking about my own shite, and I don't feel like tarting it up. Hi, I'm Alan Williams. Left school after my hires and studied sociology at college in Newcastle. Lived in a city centre flat and enjoyed a few years of easy education before uni, while gaining some life experience in a different city. Degree level next? Why, of course. Economics, art and humanities, linguistics and languages. Blah, blah, fucking blah. Maybe it's spiteful to think like this. That isn't really the case. These cunts have led different lives to us, and it's only the night, sitting before Monica Mason, that I feel envious of the lives that they take for granted. I don't want to sit with strangers who are going to judge me and feign a mild interest in my daffy college course. I can't really talk on their level yet. I'm not stupid. I've got opinions and all that. I know about politics and other topics of polite conversation, but my opinion is like a trained monkey to these cunts. Frankenstein's creature, an eloquent mutant, a hybrid specimen, working class with a brain and an accent that guarantees the split forever. Of course I'll go. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for that, Graham. My first question was actually going to be if you could situate the scene in the novel, but I feel like you pretty much already did that. So I'm going to ask you instead, like, to what extent do you draw on your own experiences when you're writing?
100%. I mean, the Young Team is a work of fiction, you know, so it's bound to operate like a work of fiction, you know, but everything pretty much in the novel is based on either my experience or a friend's experience or shared experience from my community. And especially these two readings, my ex, who I remained friends with, ended up going to St Andrews University, and sometimes she would invite me up, and we'd sit and drink like buckfast together and smoke cannabis, you know, and then we'd go into St Andrews University Union. And I've often told the story that obviously I was an English major and I was reading, and inside their union they used to have pages of books making up the wallpaper, so they were like plastered to the wall, and I recognised one that I was reading, and I pointed it out, and I think the people we were sitting with were just surprised I could read, never mind I was studying English, you know what I mean? So the class conflict was absolutely so sharp there, you know, all these kids were middle and some upper class, you know, they lived completely different lives from us, and almost without opening my mouth, you know, the length of my hair, the clothes I chose to wear separated me from them in such a profound way, you know. So the class conflict absolutely was there in my own work, you know.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I feel like that's something you address really well in your book. So my next question, just before we hear from Eli, was I know you've created a documentary with the BBC, which I absolutely loved. It was amazing. But I've noticed in the Young Team, the pages are peppered with song titles. What made you want to add music in such a specific way?
You know what, it's a good question, because it's something I completely underestimated, the power of music. And I didn't have like a playlist or anything like that in my mind. I was just literally picking songs that I liked from back in the day, you know, and they're all quite authentic songs that you would kind of need to have lived through the early 2000s to pick out, you know. They're not the kind of the ones you'll hear in the gym, so to speak. But it was the crime novelist Alan Parks had said to me, have you got a Spotify playlist? And I said, no. So I made that. And just what a response I got just for the music, you know, people were always saying that to me. But working class issues, I think like rave music was particularly suited to that. You know, it was high energy, high adrenaline, and rave was such a moment of like light relief among the suffering, you know, and it was like an explosion of colour among these really grey experiences and grey streets. So rave music was so important, not just in this part of the world, but North England, other places, but it tends to be working class, young people that consume it.
Perfect. So I'm going to pass on to Sarah, and she's going to ask Eli to read from their book. But just before I do it, I'm just going to remind the audience that we're going to have like 20 minutes for questions at the end. So if any of you have any questions, just feel free to pop them in the chat.
I'm back. Fabulous. Right. Brilliant. So I'm really delighted to be able to introduce Ely Percy today. Now, Eli is a Scottish writer who grew up in Renfrew, and since their first publication in 1994, they've released a memoir, Cracked: Recovery After Traumatic Brain Injury, graduated with a distinction from Glasgow University's MPhil in creative writing, and contributed over 50 short stories to literary journals. They've published 2 novels, Vicky Romeo Plus Joolz and Duck Feet, which we'll be hearing an excerpt from today. So Eli, welcome, and we'd love to hear from your book.
Hello. Yeah, no, it's really great to be here. I think it's a really good match with me and Graham, because I just read his book just before he's asked me to come, so it was really exciting. I'm going to read from the 3rd chapter of Duck Feet. I don't think it really needs any explanation because it's pretty like early on in the book and it kind of stands alone. But this is one of my favourite chapters, and I haven't read it to an audience for maybe about 15 years because it was originally a short story, and it's changed quite a bit since then. So this is this chapter is called Social Dancing. So I'll just dive in. Social dancing's dead romantic. I love all that gay Gordons and dashing white sergeants and having to curtsy to your partner. My favourite dances are the tango and the Lindy Hop and I love watching Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers doing it in all the old movies. Mr. Anderson's our teacher for social dancing, and he's pure gorgeous. He's only about 20 odd, and he's got spiky blonde hair and blue eyes. He's got a pure sexy bum. The only thing I don't like about social dancing at school is that I never get a decent partner. I always got all the mingers and all the ones that step on your toes. It was my ma that got me into it. When she was a wee lassie, she went every week to dance classes at Paisley Town Hall, and she won loads of medals for it. Last night, she was showing me how to do the Charleston while she was waiting the dinner cooking, when my pal Charlene came to the door. "Charlene, hen," my ma said, "come on in and have a boogie with us." Charlene just looked at me and rolled her eyes and said, "Kirsty, you're so never coming to a Kirky disco with us," she said. "You get pure laughed off the dance floor." This morning was social dancing first thing, but I couldn't do it because I twisted my ankle last night when I was doing the Charleston. I had to sit out on the bench next to Harpreet and Charlene and Charlene's pal Kelly Marie. Harpreet's parents had written a letter to the school saying she's not allowed to do it because they don't want her to dance with boys. I don't understand the reason she's not allowed. I thought it was something to do with religion at first, but then I found out there's a lassie in 1G who's also a Sikh, and apparently she takes part. Not with Charlene and Kelly Marie though, they've just pure can't be bothered doing it. Kelly Marie is one of these folk that talk and talk and talk, and all she ever talks about is herself and whatever guy she fancies. The day she was talking about what she's wearing to the Kirky disco this Friday, Charlene's gone with her, and she's not even asked me, and Charlene's meant to be my best pal. "I've nothing decent to wear," said Kelly Marie, even though she's the type of lassie that would look good in a black bin bag. "What about your white jeans with a pink halter neck tap you got out a zigzag last Saturday?" said Charlene. "No," she said, "I've stopped wearing the white jeans because they make my arse look big." I thought to myself, see you, Kelly Marie, you're full of it. You're just pure fishing for compliments. "Well, what about your light blue jeans then?" said Charlene. "I think you should wear your light blue jeans with a pink halter neck tap." "Do you think so?" said Kelly Marie. "Aye, you'll look smashing," said Charlene. "Won't you, Kirsty?" Aye," I said, even though I didn't know what a halter neck top was. "Are you gone?" Kelly Marie said to me. I hadn't really thought about it because the film Monty was coming on the telly and I wanted to watch it, but I just said, "I don't know, I might." Then Charlene butted in and said, "I don't think it's really your scene, Kirsty." We had social dancing again the day and my ankle was still sore, so I had to sit out on the bench with Harpreet and Charlene and Kelly Marie again. Harpreet was doing her French homework and I was watching Mr. Anderson showing the class how to do a foxtrot, and Kelly Marie was talking and talking and talking about her hair and her makeup and how she thought Chris Rice from our Reggie class was pure sexy. "Oh, do you know think he's just a pure darling?" she said. "He's like the pure nicest looking guy in our hell year." "Aye, he's all right," said Charlene. "All right," said Kelly Marie. "You've nae taste." "I heard he's a pure brilliant dancer, but," said Charlene. "Yes," said Kelly Marie. "You can pure break dance and do the splits and all that." "That's pure brilliant," said Charlene. "I wish I could do the splits." "Do you think he'll want to nip me tomorrow night at the Kirky disco?" said Kelly Marie. "I'll ask him," said Charlene. "Me and Chris are like that." She crossed two fingers and I wanted to burst out laughing when I seen her doing it because she doesn't even know Chris Rice. The only time she's ever been near him was that time he came up to me in the dinner hall and asked if he could copy my geography homework. Kelly Marie had managed to stop talking for about 2 seconds and she was sitting painting her nails with Tipp-Ex. Mr. Anderson came up and asked what she was doing. "I'm painting my nails," she said. She didn't even look up when she said it. She just kept putting the Tipp-Ex on her nails till they were completely white, and then she bled on them to help dry it in. "And what should you be doing?" Mr. Anderson said. Kelly Marie opened her bag up and took out a green projector screen pen that she'd obviously knocked off one of the teachers, and then she drew a wee love heart on her nail and wiggled it about. "Miss Walker?" said Mr. Anderson. "Aye," said Kelly Marie. "That's my name, don't wear it out." Charlene started to giggle and I nearly did as well, but I just managed to stop myself. "See me at the end of the period," he said. Then Mr. Anderson looked at me and he said, "How's the foot, Kirsty?" And I said, "It's still sore, but hopefully it'll be all right for next week, sir." "That's what I like to hear," he said. And he smiled at me and I pure felt my heart bumping up into my throat. He was about to walk away again when Charlene said, Ha ha, Kirsty's got a pure ready. Kirsty fancies Mr. Anderson. I thought the ground was going to open up and swallow me. I was pure mortified. I could have killed Charlene. And what's your excuse for not taking part today, Miss Clark? Isn't an excuse, said Charlene. I've got a sore stomach. Have you brought a note? He said. How could I bring a note, sir? She said. I can't predict if I'm going to be no well. Well, it seems to me, said Mr. Anderson, that this is a recurrent illness, and if it persists, I'll have to ask you to bring a letter from your doctor. Okay? No, said Charlene. I beg your pardon, said Mr. Anderson. It's my time of the month, she said. Okay. Mr. Anderson walked away, shaking his head. Dick, said Charlene under her breath. Then she looked to me for confirmation that he was. Aye, well, that's him shattered, Charlene said to Kelly Marie. How did you know say you had your period? Kelly Marie shrugged and then showed off one horn with Tipex coated fingernails and wee green pictures. Then she turned round to Harpreet and said, Hey, hang me. What's that religious lassie's name again? Harpreet, or whatever your name is. How come he didn't pull you up? Sorry, said Harpreet. She looked up for the textbook she was reading. How you know doing it? Said Kelly Marie. Oh, said Harpreet, it's... Harpreet didn't get the chance to answer though, because Charlene jumped in and spoke over the top of her. It's against your religion to do social dancing, isn't it? She said, looking pure pleased with herself. Actually, no, said Harpreet. It's because it is, said Charlene. Don't geese it. We went a trip to the mosque when we were in primary, so I know there's loads of shit years ones on early today. Harpreet giggled. I'm not a Muslim, she said, but it's okay, I'm not offended. Lots of folk get muddled up. Charlene pulled her face. My parents just don't want me doing social dancing, she said, because in Punjabi culture, it's seen as taboo for boys and girls to dance together. Although obviously not everyone upholds that tradition, which is why, who gives a shit, said Charlene. Everything else is against your bloody religion. I was proper gobsmacked by that. So was Harpreet, I think. I thought what Harpreet was saying was dead interesting, but of course I never got to hear the rest of the conversation. Harpreet's dead nice and all, and she's been a much better pal to me than Charlene has lately. I don't know what Charlene's problem is, but nearly everything that comes out on roof these days is dead sarky. There was a pure awkward silence after that. Then Kelly Marie, who'd just finished Tipex and her other horn, hit out with, Hey, what religion are you anyway? Harpreet said, I'm a Sikh. Sikh, said Kelly Marie. You don't look no well to me. Then her and Harpreet started sniggering. Charlene said, next time we get told to do social dancing, I'm going to say I can't, because it's against my religion. This morning, Mr. Anderson picked me to go up and demonstrate the military two-step with him in front of the whole class. I was dead nervous in case I mucked it up, even though I'd been practicing non-stop the whole weekend. When I put my arm on his shoulder, I just about fainted because I could feel how muscly he was underneath his shirt. Then he said in front of the whole class that I was a brilliant dancer. Mr. Anderson made all the lassies line up against the wall so as the boys could pick a partner. Kelly Marie was made to date for a change, but that was because she'd been warned if she got one more punny, then she was in a behaviour timetable. She was pure Beeling, partly because she was made date when Charlene was off sick, and partly because everybody in school had been talking about the Kirky Disco and how Chris Rice had gave her a knockback. Kelly Marie was standing right next to me when Chris walked out towards us and he went and pure blanked her. He was looking straight at me when he held out his horn and I nearly fell over with a shock, and so did Kelly Marie. And he smiled at me and said, Kirsty, would you like to dance? Thank you.
That was fab. Thank you so much, Eli. That's also one of my favourite chapters because my school was also obsessed with social dancing. So takes me back. So I wanted to ask you, Duck Feet is made up of a lot of sort of wee incidents. It's very episodic in the way it's structured. They're almost like wee short stories that build up to give a kind of fuller picture. Was that something you were conscious of doing from the beginning of this project, or was it the way that the thing kind of built?
Duck Feet started off as one short story called Duck Feet, and I liked the voice, so I just kept writing. I'd written a couple of short stories, but I'd been writing like a novel before, and I really just wanted to write something that was short. But I found Kirsty's voice really easy, so I was just picking new subjects to write. I'll write about it on the French class, writing about it on social dance, and it just kept going. When I got to about 10, I was just thinking, oh, this is going to be a longer thing. But I wrote a short story collection of 65 short stories But when I sent it out to publishers, they didn't want it as a whole thing. They didn't think that people would want to read it. You know, and I was getting it published in lots of like little magazines, all different short stories, different Scottish magazines. But the way things were with the like Scottish literary scene, I might send out, you know, I might have had like 5 stories published, and then I would run it on maybe magazines to send it, because I'd have some knockback. If I sent out 5 stories, I might get 1 published, and it takes such a long time. And stories, and then magazines would fold, and I'm like, where else can I send them? So it just took such a long time, 16 years, and then Monstrous Regiment came, and they said to me, they had actually published one of the stories, Nae Shame, and they had been sort of like watching what was happening with me getting all the stories published, and they said, would you make it a novel? So I said, yeah. But I had no idea when they said, could you make it a novel, what I would have to do was a complete structural rewrite. It ended up being 20,000 words longer, and there's 70 chapters now, and there was stuff that was missed out that had to be cut. I had to do like a through line through the whole entire book. It was starting from page 1 again, and like I think most of the stories ended up having to have a slightly different ending, so that they linked. So yeah, it's quite a journey.
I totally would relate to the idea that Kirsty would be a character you'd want to come back to. She's very readable and very relatable. Was she based on folk you already knew, or is she sort of built up of just...
No, I don't. The funny thing was, that first story, her voice was very, very clear, and I'm just one of these people that I can be sitting in a bus or walking down the street, and I hear somebody talking, and then I could go away and I could continue that conversation in my head. I'm just good at voices, and I've just got a good ear. But yeah, I enjoyed writing her character and interviewed. I think once I got to about 10, 12 stories, I started like asking people that I knew, what was your high school experience, and I'd ask them the same questions. And what I did was, if there was maybe like 5 people telling me a very similar story, then I was like, that has to go in the book. You know, I have to write about that. If somebody's telling me a completely different story, I'm like, maybe that doesn't go in the book. So it was more about the input that I got from other people who were very, very keen to sort of tell me like what it was like for them. And those people that I spoke to that were 10 years older, 10 years younger. My youngest interviewee was 13 at the time. And look, people were, I mean, she was telling me the same stories that folk that were 10 years older than me were telling. So I was like, what I realised was, like, you know, school's not changed any. I left in 1997, I think. My sister, I think, must have left like 2000, 2001 or something. And you know, when I interviewed this kid, she was like 13 in 2005, I think. So, and she's telling me the exact same stuff, and the only things that had changed really were technology and like politics.
Yeah, I left school in 2007, and it all really rang very true to me. I think I'm the same age as Kirsty. Relatedly, this was really a question that me and Sarah had put together for both of you, which was that both of your novels feel really authentic in the way that they describe being a teenager, like just how intense and weird that experience is. And I wondered how you got yourselves into that kind of a mindset and sort of avoided being overly nostalgic about what that moment in your life was like.
I really like reading, not necessarily YA, but I quite like reading coming of age novels, and I don't know, I just kind of like the teenage voices, or like sort of early 20s. You know, my novel before that was about like young LGBT people who were like between sort of 16 and 25, and I don't know, I just find that, I don't know, I just find that that's attractive to me. I like first person narratives. I like to get right into the skin of a character. Yeah, I don't know why I like that. I mean, I was in my 20s at the time. I was still living at home. I was still living in Renfrew. It didn't seem like a jump for me to write about, you know, teenagers. I don't know what that says about me.
Graeme, what about yourself?
I think, to be honest with you, when you study English, you end up reading a lot of books that you've not chosen to read, you know. And I think when people ask me, what do you read of typically, you know, a lot of Scottish social realism stuff, of course, you know what I mean? But it becomes a bit of a busman's holiday, you know, always talking about the same stuff. So I'm trying to read the weird and wonderful stuff now. Like David Keenan's book, it took me right out, because it was set in my hometown, but it took me right out the environment that I knew, you know. So I read widely, but try and read different stuff as well as just what we write, you know.
Totally. Sarah, did you want to come in here?
So all these questions from now on are just for both of you. But I wanted to ask, both Duckfeet and the young team have got a really strong sense of place. And I think part of this largely is to do with the fact that you both chose to write in Scots. So do you both feel like this was a conscious choice, or do you feel like this was something that happened very naturally? Like, did the characters sort of choose their own voices?
I think, to be honest with you, that I get far too much credit for the voice that I use, because it was just my voice, you know, and it's the voice that kind of exists within my head, you know, and we have got that internal voice and an external voice. You know, and I think the only times that really changed was when my mum said, you know, you need to speak properly when you're going for a job interview, and that kind of social conformity of language. So when it came for me to write a story based on my teenage years and my life, you know, it was absolutely the only voice I had, and it's still the only voice I possess, you know. And I try and write in standard English voices as characters, they come out really unnatural. Standard English is the second language for me, you know.
How about yourself, Eli?
Well, Kirsty's voice kind of came from nowhere, but when I think I very quickly became aware that I was telling stories about Kirsty that you wouldn't usually have associated with Scottish sort of working class novels that had been published, because a lot of stuff has been about sort of poverty and drink and drugs. Nothing wrong with that. Not slagging anybody's book or anything like that. Nothing. But that wasn't my story, and I kind of very quickly realised that I wanted to write about things that folk that I knew what had happened to them growing up. So yes, but sense of place, massively important. I still lived in Renfrew at the time, and like it just felt really easy to I don't know, and it felt very important to write about Renfrew, because I hadn't seen a book about Renfrew before. But yeah, lots of people that I grew up with. I mean, I never knew we were working class until I was about 19 or something. I never felt poor or anything like that. There was always food on the table. There was always, we had shoes, you know, we had clothes. And, you know, but I'm very aware that I'd go to high school and there'd be folk that would be going to holidays in France and stuff like that, and like who lived in the posher side of Renfrew. And that just wasn't, we just knew we'd never have asked. You know, we were going to go to day trips to Ayr and the Magnum and Irvine. You just knew that wasn't open to you. So I wanted to write about the things that had happened to us, although my sister did say initially, Kirsty doesn't really sound like you. And I thought, well, my accent's quite kind of changed over time. But I was like, aye, but she wasn't meant to sound like me, because she's not me. She's just like somebody that lives in Renfrew, and there's a sort of a range of accents in Renfrew. So I kind of tried to, hers was sort of middle of the road, and there's other characters who speak a little bit different from her, and that was quite deliberate, because I just wanted to sort of showcase like the sort of diversity within that tiny town.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's so interesting. I guess kind of just as a follow-up question for both of you, I feel like there's been a lot of books recently that have been published in Scots that do maybe focus more on working class people. So do you see yourself as part of a literary movement or like a change in literature? I don't know, I feel like maybe Irvine Welsh kicked that off with Train Spotting, but I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, certainly growing up, we would get told, don't say aye, don't say no, you'll never get a job, you'll never work. You'd go into school and teachers would be like that, you're trash. You know, if you say aye or no, you're trash. But even my parents would be saying, don't speak like us. You know, don't speak like us, you never work. And that was just kind of drummed into you. you know, and you would hear teachers like laughing at people that spoke, you know, that spoke in Scots or said words in certain ways, and they were made a mockery of, and it was quite horrible actually. But when I think I was about 19 or 20, when a tutor at an evening class I was going to gave me How Late It Was, How Late, and I thought, oh my God, this book's won the Booker Prize. So I think I started to then think, I think I need to investigate this. And I started to listen to how people around about me were speaking, and then try to have a shot at it. And it did take me a wee while to sort of fine tune my ear. But yeah, it feels much easier to, I don't know, but I don't know if I'm part of a movement. I just think that was just something that I wanted to do.
I think you've got kind of delusions of grandeur when you start scribbling away that you're going to be part of the canon. You know, somebody told me that I was part of the Scottish canon now, and I don't know how I make that, you know. I kind of laughed, you know, but I suppose it's true, you know, we're all part of a sequence. I was, you know, when I heard about Tom Leonard, my granny used to have poems for Tom Leonard, you know, and somebody had like written them out for her because he didn't have, you know, a printer then, so she had these and she used to read them sometimes. And you know, when I came across James Kelman and all that, and I started studying English, you know, I realised we were very much a kind of subspecies almost, you know, among UK literature and London publishing specifically, you know. So, but for me, like, it was the female voices that came through in that middle year. So it was Jenny Fagan and Kerry Hudson that really, you know, propelled me, and you know, but the voice absolutely was super important, you know. But absolutely, it was one of the main reasons why my novel was rejected for the years. And just like Eli, when she, you know, when they were 16 years, it took me 8 years, and the majority of those rejections were all because of language, you know. So it's difficult to do that.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to me, because I feel like the reason why your novels are so captivating is because of the language. So it's just really interesting that that's the reason why they were rejected. But yeah, I'm going to pass you on to Sarah for the next question.
Hello. Yes, so moving to a slightly different topic. One of the things that when me and Sarah met to talk through the things that we loved about these novels, one of the things we were really interested in was that both of these novels talk a lot about the difficulties and pressures of growing up as a young man in the west of Scotland, and the way that that can be really challenging. Even though Kirsty's a female protagonist, the boys in that story have quite difficult trajectories, and we wondered what you guys wanted to communicate about that experience in your novels.
I think guys get a hard time, you know, and sometimes that's absolutely justified, you know. The minority of men, you know, especially the headlines recently, you know, there's these real extremes about gender violence and all that. But I think the majority of young working class men are just decent guys trying to struggle by, you know. And I think being, you know, a white working class male wasn't really, I don't know, there was nobody really backing them up, you know. There was nobody trying to create an affectionate portrait, you know. And I don't think the young team is an affectionate portrait, by the way, but because it's all about drugs and violence. But I think what it does is try and undermine some of the stereotypes, you know, in the hard shell, because that's what people see in our performances. And it was a performative act, all that, you know, like putting a Merapeak on and putting a tracksuit on. You were trying to survive in a very tough alpha environment, you know, and a lot of those men suffered because of that. And they didn't choose it, it was thrust upon them, you know. So the young team just tries to show real relationships, you know, real emotion. Somebody said the young team's a love story, and I laughed at that as well, you know, but it is kind of, because it's all about Monica and it's all about trajectories, you know. So I think it does demonstrate that, you know, that there's actually behind the veneer, the machismo, behind the nonsense, there's actually emotion and hopes and dreams and fragility, you know. And that's big language that you just don't know at that age, you know. But aye, it's there.
I think I'm going to say something about the young team here, because what I used to be a writer in residence in Pomont young offenders, and I think when I was reading the young team, what really struck me, and maybe I'm daft that I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected to feel so sad so soon. I thought the book would have built up more, and even though I'd listened to your talks and everything, I was so shocked at how you didn't try to make it like he didn't try to make it really funny in terms of like, oh look at this, is brilliant being an Ed. I thought it was going to be like you built up and you built it all up, and then later on it all came crashing down. But actually it was broken to start with. I thought these boys have sort of bonded together, not just because they're teenagers, but because there was something wrong with the world around about them, and like they were getting strength for each other. I don't know. It did make me feel really sad, because I thought about boys that I knew, and I thought I understood. You know, I thought I understood what they were going through, and I got a lot out of reading the book. I don't know
when you look at, and thank you for saying that, like, but you're right, you know, that's what my mum says. She's like, all I detect out this full book is pure sorrow and regret, and you know, and that was what bonded a lot is, you know what I mean? We had just what you talked about, we had a social spectrum, right? It was some of our parents were like, you know, head teachers and cops, and some didn't work, you know. There was a whole range of social backgrounds in the young team. But the commonality of it was we were all trying to grow up as young men in a broken place, you know. And for me personally, my father died when I was young, so I didn't have, you know, neither a positive nor a negative masculine force. I had to kind of learn how to be a man on my own, you know, because my mum never remarried. And some people tell me I've done all right, which is nice, you know, but I existed in a very female world, and maybe that has made me a more sensitive guy, if you want to call it that. I hate that word, because anytime guys try to talk about their feelings, they get accused of being sensitive, and the masculine walls come shooting back up, you know, because it offends them. But the reality is, when you look at the suicide figures, you know what I mean? You know, there's a lot of guys out there suffering in silence, and they're just too, you know, they're too convinced of their own masculinity to ever put their hand up, you know. And I've had friends struggling with their mental health, and their partners know, but they just try to ask them because they don't want to offend them or hurt their feelings, you know, or emasculate them in some way, you know, which is not the case. We'd obviously be better talking about your feelings, but even if you write it, it's still difficult to talk about it, you know. So it's a current issue, and I think a lot of the issues we face, violence, you know, and drugs, and the people that are succumbing to overdose are young men that are suffering, you know, that just can't talk about it.
I definitely would have been chasing you to get you to come into the jail.
Oh, don't Pullman. I've done loads of the prison stuff, but I've never been to Pullman yet because of COVID. But they have booked me. Don't worry, I'm due in there. But I've done shots in Berlin, so the other end of the spectrum, you know. But the young guys are definitely the hard ones, because they're living it. You know, you'll not teach a guy that's serving a life sentence and they don't know. You know, you're just trying to ask them to, you know, engage with their lives and their journeys and what goes beyond that. You know, and try to stop a revolving door in the prison system. But the young boys are only in for short sentences, so they are tough, you know. And I'm never nervous about that, but they're the ones that you need to reach, you know, because they're going straight back out into the community, commit offences. So
I always found the ones that had left, the ones that were in for a month or 2 months, well, it was a riot for them. They were just bouncing in, bouncing out, and it was like they were there and they were seeing their pals. The people who were in for 4 years or more were the ones that were like, right, I need to do something in my life, even if it's, you know, it's in here. I'm in here for a long haul, and they were the folk that I thought, you know, they were going to turn up to your class because they'd nothing. They needed something. But yeah, very hard to get anybody that was in for a couple of months to sit down and write a short story.
You need to understand masculine capital and street capital, and if you don't understand that, then you're, you know. Because like when one of my pals that served a sentence in Berlin, right, he's like, what are you going in to talk to guys in the jail for? You weren't in jail. And I'm like, exactly, mate, you know what I mean? Because do you know what one thing guys in jail are? They're experts about what being in jail is. You know what I mean? I'm trying to tell them about the trajectory of me. Instead of going to jail, I went to university, right? And there must be some value you can kind of distill for that experience, you know what I mean? Because I was one of them, you know what I mean? I wasn't like a kind of peripheral guy, you know what I mean? Who just kind of like happened up on the young team story. I was very much one of the prominent ones. And the only reason I wasn't in jail, I'm probably more likely dead because of my substance abuse and alcoholism, was because of English literature, you know? So I owe a great debt to books and words, and that's something we can pass on to our communities.
Yeah. I feel like just off the back of that, Graham, I've noticed that in both of your texts, there's quite dark elements. Like there's both murders, stabbings, there's suicides as well. And I think in reading those books, I was really struck by how how tenderly you deal with them. Like, you don't shy away from the issues, you deal with them very frankly. But I felt a lot of sadness reading them. And I know you kind of mentioned this a bit before, both of you, but do you feel like it was like something that you felt was important to show in your texts? Like these sort of, yeah, just the darker side of society, really?
I think that although I kind of said I wanted something more upbeat because a lot of Scottish novels were kind of, you know, more grey, I still think I couldn't have that book to be, oh, happy clappy, this is, you know, everything's great, because that just wasn't reality either. I knew people that, you know, that I grew up with that died from drug overdoses, and, you know, like that were stabbed and stuff like that, and like it was so sad. You know, so that had to be part of the book as well.
For me, like I didn't want to sensationalise violence, you know, and people often, that's one of the first questions you get asked, by the way, when you start writing social realism, you're glamorising gang violence, and I mean, I don't think you've read it, and if you have read it, you've not understood it, because God, none of that was glamorous. The sorrow of a young man at 21 years old shouldn't be sitting, you know, reminiscing in pure sorrow about people that have died and all the struggles. Like, it was like as if they'd been to war or something. Do you know what I mean? And like, if you contrast that with other kids, you know what I mean, who are out mountain biking and going skiing and all that, they're happy go lucky, and then they wonder why your mental and physical health's failing us at 30 years old, or you've died or killed, you know. But for me, like, the mental health stuff was like the dark night of the soul writing that. And see, I had written 3 novels and then condensed it into 1 for publishing reasons over the 7 years. But every time I had to run through it, and I had to get to chemical unhappiness, the dark leaves of mint, you know, and I try to get years of, you know, continual attempts to stop using substances and years of mental health struggles into 2 chapters, you know. So there's only one way to do that, and it's to go dark, you know, and it really does go heavy and dark, and you can feel that. It's like the innermost cave, if you want to call it that, you know, as a literary term, but it felt like that. And it was like a purge, you know, and I just don't think, I've never read men's, you know, anxiety, mental health at point blank range like that. You know, there's lots about depression, but no anxiety, and you know, and people suffer with them a lot, you know, and they just don't have language for it. I didn't at the time. I thought I was losing my marbles. I thought I was less of a man. I thought I just used too many drugs and I was going psychotic. All I had was anxiety, you know what I mean? Never diagnosed by a doctor, you know. But so it was, of course it was thingy, you know. So, and I didn't want to make it this kind of like gung-ho, swashbuckling tale where everybody's getting stabbed and we're all going about with scars on our faces. Like, there's only really one big gang fight in the young team. There's a couple of skirmishes in school. It's actually very restrained in that way, and it was meant to be, you know, and based on real stuff. It wasn't my pal that got murdered, it was one of my pals who murdered somebody, you know. And fiction gives you a blanket to talk about difficult stuff when you can tweak it slightly, you know, without being too exposing or too raw for you. And you know.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing that, both of you.
So I think we're going to go to some questions that the audience have put together now, and handily enough, we actually lead into one that really fits into what you've both just been talking about. So Natalie has asked, there are a lot of similarities between your books, especially when thinking about Azzy and Willie McCoy, but both have very different outcomes. Why did you choose the outcome that you did, each of you?
God, I think with Wally, right from the start, you know, he's this lovely, sweet guy, but right from the start, Kirsty is telling you right away, mad mental Willie McCoy is the hardest kid in school and stuff like that. That's what she's heard. Watch out for him because he's going to batter you. If he doesn't like you, batter you. Tells the teachers to fuck off and stuff like that. And then you meet him and he's just like, he's really nice to her. And I don't know, I'd seen a lot of that. I had seen a lot of that in school, where like folk that had their path was sort of decided for them by teachers and adults before they'd even finished high school, that they'd been told they were bad kids. You're just a badging, Berlin graduate, you know. So I wanted to kind of like, there's bits where like I've sort of visited quite near the start where like he goes missing and stuff like that, and of course, you know, Jenky's in the jail and stuff like that, and actually he's got chickenpox. You know, and I tried to kind of thread that through the whole way. I don't know whether I should tell you what happens at the end. Tell people what happens at the end. So, yeah.
You know, for Azzy, Williams and myself, you know, that I think guys, when they go to the extremity of this, right, and they join gangs, there's only two outcomes. It's triumph or tragedy. There's no in between, right? And that's why, you know, all the usual suspects, half of them are dead and half of them are like teachers, you know what I mean? Or, you know what I mean? And, you know, people, you could say it's a redemptive arc. And all these books, by the way, this trope ends with an exodus, right? Because you go at the end and there isn't a staying. You don't just like, you're around your pals in your natural habitat and your environment and you go, right, I'm just not taking drugs and drink anymore, you know what I mean? But I'm still going to hang about with the troops because, you know, birds of a feather flock together. That is an eternal wisdom, right? And eventually you need to make a decision between the past and the future, right? There is no present, you know what I mean? You need to make a decision. So, you know, for me, the redemptive arc, right, it wasn't just being twee. I found faith, you know what I mean? I prayed to God and asked for help and I got off drugs, you know, for the first time, and I'd been trying and failing for years. And then my life began to change slowly. And I still had a lot of trauma and a lot of pain to go through and deal with, you know what I mean? But, you know, and that's Azzy's journey. It's not that we don't deal in certainties. We don't deal in, that's him, you know what I mean? He's going to go to uni, he's going to be a great guy, he's going to struggle, you know what I mean? And when people ask me where did Azzy go at the end, I don't know, and I'm still trying to figure that out, you know, I'm still trying to find peace, you know, and stop. You know, we look back with such nostalgia, but that's because we've not replaced our lives with positive things, you know what I mean? And we don't have a lot of friends that are, you know, no gang members or drug dealers or, you know what I mean? We're still trying to forge that future. So it's, when we tell people, when people say, how am I going to change my life, what you have, Graham? I say, with great difficulty and great commitment. And, you know, what's out there for you, you need to go find it. I'm still trying to find it.
So Kirsty has asked a question. She said, do you think that middle class appreciation for working class voices in fiction and working class authors can be translated into middle class support for working class politics? And she's noted, I don't think it happens much currently. So
I think there's a huge gulf between the understanding of the political class and their lived experience, you know. Irving Welsh, when he wrote Trainspotting, was accused of being a voyeuristic peep into an alien subculture by the New York Times. I don't think that's why Irving Welsh wrote Trainspotting. You know, he wrote it because he was a heroin addict in Leaf in the 80s, you know. And, you know, the political class and when people read it, I think they don't get it. And even if they did, you know, they're still living in a different world, especially in Westminster, you know. So I don't think it does inspire change. I think what it does is it convinces people who are living that life that there might be something else out there for them, you know. And it's that is the main driver. They see themselves through recognition, and then they see the exodus at the end, and they think that might be me, you know. So it adds worth and value to people.
I think a lot of middle class people, or certainly in publishing, have an idea of what working class lives are like, and if you don't fit that, then it's very difficult to get your work out there. If you're writing about being working class, I don't think that I necessarily fitted the model, because the book wasn't all about, you know, poverty. And I guess you had the same sort of problem as well.
Brill, Andrew's asking, how liberating is it to write in your own voice, and does this make it easier to tell a story?
Certainly makes it easier for me to tell a story. It just flows better. I'll write both in English and in Scots. Yeah, and I like reading in Scots. I actually like reading different vernaculars. And I can read stuff that's in a Welsh accent, and that it takes you a wee while to tune your you know, to get tuned to it. But I enjoy reading things like that. So it makes sense for me to want to write like that. Again,
for me, like, I would need to translate my own voice into standard English, and then, you know what I mean, and then try and disseminate it that way. And, you know, after about 5 or 6 years, right, I had just run dry, right, nothing was happening. And then eventually I got an offer of representation, right? And honestly, even though it was the agent was in with all the top dogs in London, we just kept getting no's because of the dialect, and he asked that awkward question, and he's like, would you rewrite it, right, in either a diluted version, or would you write it in standard English, right? And I said, you know what, I says, John, see, after 6 years, mate, you give it a try, because this, I need to do this, I've committed to do this as a life choice, right, as a career, right? So I tried it, right, and I rewrote the first 3 chapters in standard English, and I threw it straight in the bin. I deleted the file because I was like, mate, no chance. It's absolutely soulless. It sucked the joy out of it. It's no me. It's a foreign language and it's a foreign voice, so forget about it, right? And then he asked me, would you do a distilled version? And I said no, because the reality is, right, that's not my voice either, and I'm no then. You know, dialects are tapestry. I'm a bit blasé about it, and I say it's my voice and all that, but trying to get that voice for audio perception into the page is difficult, especially trying to get that through London. You know, they got me a copywriter for Edinburgh, and they said, we've got a proofer, you know, he's for Edinburgh. And I'm like, oh, was that the only guy you could find? Or one Scottish guy? And they were a bit like, oh, no, he's good, God, he's good, you know, he's going to be brilliant. And I was reading loads of Edinburgh patterns starting to kind of emerge through it. So it was a tapestry, you know, that the threads were being pulled. So it was very difficult. You know, I take full credit for the commitment to that.
And our very last question before we wrap things up, Rory has asked a sort of a great kind of takeaway points question if we were doing a tutorial, which is, what is your advice for young writers when it comes to the practical side of the craft, such as finding an editor, an agent, or just generally navigating publishing?
God, I guess it depends where you are. Are we talking about somebody that's never written anything before, or are we talking about somebody that's been writing for a wee while? I did a one-to-one like mentoring session with a boy in Beaumont actually. He was in and he wanted to be a writer. He'd started writing some short stories, and he asked if I could do a session with him, and I said, well, the first thing you need to do is sort of like decide what kind of writer do you want to be? You know, are you going to write in this particular genre? You know, who do you like reading? If you're looking for an agent, then, you know, maybe start with who you like reading first, and find out who their agent is and what are the similarities with their work and your work, because there is absolutely no point sending your work out to somebody that likes romance stories if you're writing sci-fi. They're not going to be interested. So I guess just start with what you like to read first, and, you know, who you like to read, and like follow them on Twitter, and, you know, yeah, find out who's writing about you and what they're doing.
I think there's a kind of uncomfortable paradox at work here, right? Because the people who are always shouting, I need an agent, right, tend to be the people who need to go back and edit their work. And the people who never shout they need an agent are the people that are actually the undiscovered geniuses out there, you know, because all they do is sit and edit their work. They want it to be as good, and they've not got the confidence to take that step, right? And I'm not the person, or nobody's got the right to tell you when that step is. But for me, right, I was focused solely on writing, right? I had no idea about business or agents or any of that, right? I had no idea, right? But what I had done, right, was spent, you know, months and years crafting something that was worth reading, right? In my opinion, right? And then eventually it was actually people recognised that in university setting, and they were like, right, now it's time for you to take the next step. You know, and that particular tutor who will go unnamed, they said, I've got queues of people outside wanting an agent, right? And none of them are anywhere near ready to do that. And then I've got you who's just come in with a full manuscript and you don't even know what a fucking agent is. You know what I mean? And that was kind of what it was like, you know. So my best advice is honestly go back to your manuscript and batter it until it's absolutely polished like a diamond. And then, like you guys said, go and find the right person and to represent you, and just don't take no for an answer, you know, because I was told no 300 times. I don't know about your rejection, but it was absolutely, you know, no. It went on for years, and I just didn't accept that was going to ever be the way, so I kept going.
Yeah, I still don't have an agent, by the way.
No.
Your agent said to me, send me your novel when it's finished, and that novel, I've still not finished it, so I've still not sent it, because I am not going to send out a manuscript that's a mess, that's rubbish. That's it. I'm not putting something out into the world that's crap. And like, just like you said, just batter it. Yeah, get it absolutely the best that you can before you send it out to anybody.
there's loads of kind of writing advice, and it says, you know, do this, do that, do this, and like somebody sent me a list recently, and I broke every single one of the rules on it, like with the young team and my next book, the effort. So I think be suspicious of writing advice. You know, there's a great book called From Pitch to Publication by Carol Blake that tells you the full business side better than any writer ever could, probably more than we know. And that's the Bible, as I always tell people that. You read that book cover to cover, you'll know everything you need. It's like a reference book, you know what I mean, for the business, and then just focus on the written work and the art. And it takes a lot of suffering writing a book. You know, I think people think you just sit in Costa with a Mac and type away, you know what I mean? You need to suffer with it, you know what I mean? They're like vampires, they suck the joy out of your life until you finish them, you know what I mean? So you're fair warned.
I'm just going to come in here really quickly. And that is actually 1 minute past 2, so I'm going to have to close the event. But that advice was so helpful. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm going to just say a couple of thank yous. So thank you very much to the Word Centre for creative writing. Thank you for Creative Scotland. Thank you to the University of Aberdeen. Thank you, of course, to Eli and Graeme, because you have both been fantastic. And thank you, of course, to Leslie, who's been amazing as always. Thank you to the WayWORD Backstage team. Thank you to the Media Services team. Thank you to the English Lit Society at the uni for sponsoring this event. And thank you to Sarah for co-chairing. And thank you very much to the audience as well. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. And we'll hopefully see you at another event very soon. But no, thank you very much, because this has been a real pleasure.